5 years ago, the life of Chris was very different. He'd been unemployed for 12 years. He had a whole range of health issues. He had no qualifications, and the area in which he lived lacked economic opportunity. At the same time, the economy of the UK was growing significantly. So why was Chris not benefiting from that wealth creation? Why were there 5 million people who were in work but also living in poverty? The answer lies with our approach to economic regeneration over the course of the last 40 years. We've invested significantly in our city centres, in places such as Manchester, with the assumption that that benefit will trickle down to people like Chris and to our communities and to our local economies. The reality of that approach to regeneration is that the richer have got wealthier and the poorer have got poorer. Inequality in the UK is growing significantly. In 2006, I started to think a little bit differently about wealth. And I asked myself two very simple questions. Where does wealth go? And how can wealth be harnessed more effectively for the benefit of people like Chris and people who live in our local economies and communities? My starting point was the process of public procurement, which is as exciting as it sounds. I know you've just had a break and something to eat. Public procurement is the process that local authorities and other institutions use to buy goods and services. Much like us as consumers, they make decisions on the basis of cost, on the basis of the quality of the good or service that they're buying, on the basis of their individual values, and on the basis of brand. I remember going and talking to my work colleagues at the think tank I worked at the time in 2006 and saying, I think we should do some work about public procurement. They looked at me quite strangely. They said, Matthew, public procurement is dull, it's bureaucratic, it's boring. I said, that may be right, but public procurement can also help address some of the challenges that people like Chris face in their everyday lives. I said procurement was important for 3 reasons. One is we spend a lot of money buying goods and services. Central government in the UK spends £280 billion a year buying goods and services. Local authorities spend £70 billion a year. If you compare that to the defence budget of the UK in 2017-18, that was £45 billion. Across Europe, procurement accounts for 14% of all trade. It's a significant amount of money. The second reason I said to colleagues that it was exciting was that it can be used to address a range of other challenges. Procurement is not just about buying a product. It's not just about buying a good or service. We can use it as a lever to create jobs. We can use it as a way of addressing unemployment. We can use it as a way of improving people's skills. We can use it as a way of reducing carbon emissions. The third reason I said procurement was exciting is because this is our money. As taxpayers, we've got a democratic right to ensure that procurement is undertaken in an efficient way, so it saves money, but also in an effective way, so it brings benefits for people and for places. Every place will have a range of different institutions. These institutions will spend a lot of money buying goods and services. They include local authorities, hospitals, colleges, and universities. They're important because they spend lots of money buying stuff. They employ lots of people. They own lots of land and assets, and importantly, a lot of them also have a democratic mandate to the people who live within that locality. In a place like ours, anchor institutions, as we call them, will spend millions of pounds every year buying goods and services. The challenge is that a lot of the decisions are made on the basis of cost. So often, the cheapest provider will win that contract. What that means is that we've got a whole range of multinational private sector organisations delivering public contracts in our places. That money scooshes out of the local economy. It goes to shareholders and stakeholders who might live in the Cayman Islands or the Channel Islands or other tax havens. It doesn't bring benefits necessarily for our people. It doesn't bring benefits necessarily for our local businesses, and it certainly doesn't contribute to wider local regeneration initiatives. Additionally, not many places understand where their procurement money goes. They don't understand where that money goes geographically, where that money goes in terms of sectors, and also the extent to which money is spent with small to medium-sized enterprises or social enterprises. Procurement officers, those are the people who make the decisions, are trained in particular ways. They're trained to think about cost. They're trained to be compliant. They're not trained to think about the wider social challenges and issues that people like Chris may face. My hypothesis is quite simple. We need to think about building wealth in our economies as opposed to that wealth bleeding and leaking out of that particular place. The work that I've done around procurement has focused upon creating greater benefits for local economies. By that I mean spending more with local businesses and organisations, and then the benefit will flow in terms of social, economic and environmental benefit. The work's not come without critique or barriers or questions. People ask me all the time, is this not just about protecting a particular local economy? Is this not a zero-sum game? Are we simply just redistributing money around the country? Is this not just about, are multinationals not the most important organisation to deliver a good or service when it comes to considerations of efficiency? Do small and local enterprises have the skills and the capacity? And is cost not the most important factor in making a decision around public spending? Over the course of the last 12 years, I've tried to prove those doubters wrong. And I've worked in probably around about 50 European municipalities or local authorities trying to change their procurement culture. I want to talk about one of those, which is Preston. 5 years ago, I met a political representative of the city of Preston in a coffee shop. And we started talking about his vision for a more socially inclusive Preston, where poverty and inequality was reduced. I said to him, you need to start thinking about the anchor institutions that are based in this economy. You need to understand the impact that they already have and how their culture can be changed to bring greater benefits for Preston. So we started by engaging with 7 institutions, 2 local authorities, 2 colleges, a university, the police, and a housing association. And we said to those organisations, we want to have a look at your procurement transactions, how much you've spent in the financial year 2012-2013. So we analysed that spend, and we found that just 5% of £750 million was spent in that particular boundary across those 7 organisations. 39% was spent in wider Lancashire, which is the county. So what that meant was that 61p in every pound being spent by those organisations leaked elsewhere. It leaked elsewhere in the country, or it leaked elsewhere overseas. That amounts to £450 million worth of public spend. So we started thinking about how that spend could be influenced, how Preston and wider Lancashire could get greater benefits from that £450 million worth of leakage. Over the course of the last 5 years, we've worked on a number of initiatives to change the whole way in which procurement is undertaken. Normally, places will think about global economic factors and legislation when it comes to making procurement decisions. In Preston, they're thinking about local priorities. So they're thinking about how procurement can be used to address unemployment amongst young people, for example. Normally, procurement decisions are made with 2 factors, cost and quality, often on a 60%, 40% split. Preston has introduced a 3rd factor, which is about social value. This is about how procurement decision-making can bring greater benefits for that place and for the people who live within that locality. So they're linking procurement to those wider outcomes. Normally, places don't understand the businesses that are in their locality. They don't understand the capabilities, the skills, the potential of those organisations to deliver goods and services. In Preston, we've created a database of organisations that can potentially contribute to reducing some of that leakage in spend, reducing some of that £450 million leaking out of the local economy. Normally, procurement are allotted into big contracts, big values, which means only large suppliers can bid for those contracts. In Preston, for school meal contracts, for example, they've broken those contracts into smaller lots. So now the school meal contract is broken down into lots around fruit and vegetables, around meat, and around dairy products, for example. What that does is it enables smaller local enterprises to bid for those opportunities. They can compete more effectively with the larger corporations, but also, and importantly, deliver greater benefits in both economic, social, and environmental terms. Normally, procurement is undertaken with efficiency and technicality in mind. In Preston, procurement officers are thinking creatively and effectively. There's been a significant change in the levels of spend that are going into the Preston economy. So when we redid the analysis in 2017, we found that instead of 5% being spent with suppliers based in Preston, 18% was spent with suppliers within the Preston City Council boundary. That's a trebling of the proportion of spend in that particular local economy. In wider Lancashire, 79% is now spent with Lancashire-based businesses and organisations. That is a doubling of the proportion of spend. In monetary terms, £74 million more is now spent in the Preston boundary than was the case in 2013. £200 million more is spent in wider Lancashire. That is a significant investment in that place, and it's a significant investment in people's lives and the functioning of that economy. For me, the important thing is not just about those figures, it's about the cultural shift that's happened within that locality. People are behaving differently in Preston. The culture of procurement officers has changed. They're now not just thinking about cost and quality, they now have an affinity to Preston as a place. They want to deliver greater outcomes. Let's go back to Chris. As a result of changes in procurement processes, and as a result of changes in the way in which suppliers behave, Chris is now in a sustainable job, and he's been in a sustainable job for 5 years. Chris's health has improved. He now has a forklift truck driving license. That's a difficult thing to say, actually. But his skills have improved. He has a family. He has a driving license. And most importantly for me, Chris is happy. Chris is an outcome of a change in the way in which a local authority and a public institution behaves. Procurement, it's not dull. I think it's really exciting. So remember, the next time you go into a shop and you take out your purse and wallet, think about the impact you could have upon someone like Chris and his life. Thanks very much.